will change our daily lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our weekly Intel stream here on Nemico Network. Second time we're actually coming to you guys live this evening, as our first stream attempt had some issues. We're currently experiencing some connection issues here this evening due to the ongoing blizzard/winter storm. Olive, I believe, is what they've named it here in the United States. So the stream might be experiencing some issues over the course of the evening, but we're going to try our best to bring you guys the news. Speaking of which, I thank all of you guys for tuning in tonight to take some time out of your day and get caught up on everything that is going on in the world today. We have quite a bit of news to bring you guys this evening. We'll be covering the latest in Ukraine, both on the ground and geopolitically. We'll also be discussing some moves geopolitically that the Russians have been making this week. We'll also be talking about China and Taiwan, as well as a variety of other subjects, which we will be covering on tonight's report. If you haven't already, hit the like button. Smash the like button, please and thank you. It's the best way to get the algorithm's attention. It's the only thing that seems to do the trick, is to hit that like button repeatedly, and also subscribe if you haven't already. If you want access to the live chat over on the YouTube channel, the best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button. It's also a good way to support us. Comment. We read all of your guys' comments. We read all of the emails, all of the private messages that you guys send over. And also, if you like this reporting, consider sharing it. It helps other people find this content. Share it with your friends, share it with your family. I'll be getting a live poll going here in the YouTube live chat here momentarily. If you guys have any suggestions for a live chat question this evening, I have a few that I'm kind of trying to choose from here. If you guys have any ideas of a really good live chat poll question, we'll get that up in the live chat this evening. For those of you that don't know, we do live stream both on Twitch and YouTube. So for those of you tuning in on Twitch tonight, welcome. Hit the follow button if you haven't already. For those tuning in on YouTube, same to you, of course. And if any of you don't like watching on YouTube, you could always go watch over on Twitch, and vice versa. If you don't like Twitch, you could always hop over onto the YouTube channel. Our Discord server, there's a link to that in the description below. It's the best place to join in on the community discussion and also have an excellent resource over there. We have an excellent resource over there for all of the up-to-date information going on in the war in Ukraine, and not just the Ukraine war, but for a variety of subjects. It's a good place to stay up to date, where everybody shares information that they're gathering. We have a pretty good system in place for vetting that information. And again, it's an excellent resource to stay up to date, and it's the best place to join in on the community discussions. Tonight, I'll be starting with our Ukraine war news as usual. Big breaking news today is, again, Russia pulling out of that nuclear treaty. I'll be talking about that in more detail later in tonight's broadcast. First, however, I will be going into the Ukraine main headlines. So we'll be covering our main headlines, and then I'll be giving you guys some battlefield updates on what's going on kind of along that front line in the east of the country. So we'll be talking about that as well. Let's go ahead and hop over to our battle map here. This is what crashed the stream last time we tried to do this. So we're going to see if we can transition over without crashing the stream. And I think we made it in one piece, guys. Let me adjust the size of the chat here for you guys, just so it's not conflicting with anything. All right. So again, this is our battle map here, provided by DeepStateMap.live. It shows the situation along this front line here in eastern and southern Ukraine, I should add. Um, Again, it has a variety of tools here at our disposal. We can see the direction of attack by not just the Russian forces, but we could see when the Ukrainians launch counter-offensives, we could see the direction of attack for them as well. I'll go ahead and start reading through our primary um, Ukraine headlines for this evening, and then after those are done, we will hop into our community aggregated reports and all that. We'll go through all that information that we have on Ukraine that's been aggregated by our wonderful community. And then, of course, I'll follow that all up by kind of taking a deep dive into the various open source intelligence tools that we have at our disposal. First, tonight, Joe Biden has said Putin has made, quote, a big mistake by suspending the last remaining nuclear arms treaty with the United States. Russia's decision to suspend its participation in the New START nuclear arms reduction treaty with the U.S. will not increase the risk of a nuclear war per se, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said. Russia's parliament on Wednesday approved Vladimir Putin's move to suspend the treaty. The Biden administration is considering releasing intelligence it believes that shows China is weighing whether to supply weapons to support Russia's war in Ukraine. Again, as I've speculated many times over the past year, that eventually China would get more involved in the war, and I believe this is a step that we are seeing kind of in that direction by China. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine as, quote, an effort to our collective conscience at a two-day meeting of the General Assembly. Friday's anniversary, which is coming up here pretty quick, is a grim milestone for the people of Ukraine and for the international community, he said in New York in a statement. Again, for those that don't know, it is currently day 365 of the invasion in Ukraine. This week basically marks 1 year that this war has been going on in Ukraine. I actually have a video covering that subject that I hope to get out later this week. Basically, a yearly recap of everything that has happened in Ukraine up to this point and where I see it going from here going forward. Meanwhile, the Biden administration vowed the U.S. will, quote, defend literally every inch of NATO. That's the exact quote there. Literally every inch of NATO, they said, ahead of talks with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and leaders of the Bucharest Nine, a collection of nations, on the most eastern parts of the NATO alliance and closest to Russia. 2 civilians have been killed in Russian shelling of the Kherson region in southern Ukraine on Wednesday. According to regional officials in those areas, Alexander Prokudin, the head of the regional military administration, said, he quoted, an 81-year-old woman and a 68-year-old man were killed during the shelling of the village of Novo Tahinka. Again, it's a little hard to pronounce there. About 40 kilometers or about 25 miles from Kherson City. A Russian missile strike on the northeastern city of Kharkiv on Wednesday morning has also left 2 civilians wounded, the governor of Kharkiv region has said in a statement. So, turning back to our battle map here, so we not only have strikes that have occurred in the Kherson region here in the south, killing civilians, but we also have some strikes that have happened up near Kharkiv as well. So again, kind of a really big takeaway here is that the conflict is not just limited to these eastern front lines here. A lot of people talk to me, and I feel like a lot of them thinking that the war is only going on here in the east, but all of Ukraine is in almost a constant state of bombardment and threat of Russian attacks at this time. Even places as far as Lviv, which we saw were bombarded earlier this week. Many different areas in both western, central, and eastern Ukraine are under almost constant threat of bombardment from the air from Russian forces. All members of the Bucharest Nine have jointly condemned Russia's war in Ukraine, a Polish presidential advisor said in a statement earlier today. President Biden and the B9 leaders, quote, reaffirmed their unwavering support for Ukraine and underscored their shared commitment to stand with the Ukrainian people for as long as it takes. That was according to a White House account of Wednesday afternoon's meeting in Warsaw, Poland. China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, has met Vladimir Putin in Moscow as China and Russia reaffirmed their close bilateral relationship. Wang told Putin that Beijing will play a, quote, constructive role, as they said, in reaching a political settlement of the crisis in Ukraine. Russian state-owned TASS news agency reported after those meetings had taken place. Earlier on Wednesday, Wang met Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, where he said he expected to reach a new consensus on advancing the relationship between the two allies. Xi Jinping, China's president, is expected to visit Putin in Russia in the coming months. Earlier this week, of course, we had that surprise visit from President Biden, who, without any announcement, made the flight and the journey to Europe and then into Ukraine by train, where he met with President Zelensky. So I believe this is a kind of a mirroring of those meetings that occurred with President Biden and Zelensky. You now have the president of China going to meet Putin in Russia here in the coming months as well. It's kind of a mirroring of that same meeting that happened with Biden in Kyiv and Zelensky. Vladimir Putin has praised soldiers who are, quote, fighting heroically, courageously, bravely. That was his quote there, to defend the fatherland. In a speech at a rally in Moscow to mark a year of the war in Ukraine, thousands gathered at Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow to attend a concert marking the Defenders of the Fatherland Day. It was quite a big spectacle the Russians put on there at that stadium, where I watched a report on this earlier. They were talking about they had brought in buses of people to attend this rally. It was very similar to some of the pro-war rallies we saw at the beginning of the war. You have a lot of Russian flags, the Z flags, kind of a lot of that symbology, and of course you have Putin making an appearance, as well, giving a big speech to the Russian people. Kind of promoting the war and driving for public support for the war effort. Meanwhile, European Union countries have failed to agree on a new set of sanctions against Russia, meant to be in place for the one-year anniversary of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine this coming Friday. 4 diplomatic sources in Brussels have told Reuters more talks among Brussels representatives of the EU member countries were due on Thursday afternoon, so we might have more information for that tomorrow evening. Britain has begun to, quote, warm up its production lines to replace weapons sent to Ukraine and to increase production of artillery shells to try to help Kyiv push back Russian forces. This comes from the Defense Minister, Ben Wallace, who said that in a report earlier today. In an interview with Reuters, Wallace said he believed Britain was in a good place to help Ukraine, but needed to sustain the provision of weapons. In other news, NATO must, quote, seriously plan for the likely future reality of a Russian-controlled Belarus. The U.S.-based think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, has warned. Putin will, quote, very likely secure significant gains in restoring Russian, and this is a kind of a mouthful of a word here for me to pronounce, so bear with me, Russian suzerainty over Belarus. and use it as a launch pad to further threaten Ukraine and NATO's eastern flank. Regardless of the outcome of his invasion of Ukraine, the ISW said in its latest update on the war. So, no matter what the outcome in Ukraine is, there is a likelihood that we will be facing a Russian-controlled Belarus, a more heavily Russian-controlled Belarus, because I would argue that they already are somewhat controlled by Russia. But in the future, that we could be seeing a far greater outreach here, a far greater influence on Belarus by the Russian government, and we could see a higher degree of control there in Belarus by the Russians. Meanwhile, Ukraine will ask Turkey and the UN this week to start talks to roll over the Black Sea grain deal, seeking an extension of at least 1 year that would include the ports of Mykolaiv, a senior Ukrainian official has said. Also, that ships would use to sail from Mykolaiv's ports into the Black Sea. That route that they would use to sail into the Black Sea. So again, they're looking to roll over that Black Sea grain deal. Again, they're seeking that extension of at least 1 year off of basically the same deal that is going now. They're looking to get that extended. Meanwhile, a group of 10 European Union member states have called for stronger action to stop Russia sourcing military parts through front companies in neighboring countries and evading Western sanctions. The 10 countries, which include France, Germany, Italy, and the Baltic states, write that, quote, 2023 must be the year of success in countering circumvention, warning that public support and international legitimacy of sanctions could wane if they are deemed ineffective. Women in Ukraine are increasingly vulnerable to sexual violence 12 months after Russia invaded the country, with reports of abuse on the rise, according to a leading humanitarian organization in the country. Women fleeing from bombed houses and their hometowns are reporting attacks occurring in the home and in communal shelters. This comes from Marizia Zapasnik, Ukraine country director for the International Rescue Committee. So that caps off my primary Ukraine headline list, but I have some other main headlines here that I'm going to cover as well before we get into our community aggregated reports. So if you bear with me one moment. Again, if anybody has questions or comments, save them for the end of the show, and we'll be doing a Q&A, a little bit of a questions and answers at the end of the live stream, where I'll be, again, answering all of your Ukraine war-related questions, all your China-related questions, and basically any questions you have. We'll be reading comments. Also, I don't believe we'll be doing a live chat poll this evening. I did have some options for them. I could not make up my mind for that live chat poll, but I do have a pretty good one that I think we might do for next week for that live chat poll. I just wasn't as prepared dealing with the connection issues that we were having this evening due to that blizzard. I wasn't able to get that live chat pinned down, that poll, pinned down. But I think we'll be doing it next week. Twiggy actually said just now, a good poll question here. Will Moldova kick out Russia of Transnistria, and will Ukraine help? That could be an interesting poll question for the future. All right, let's hop back over. We're going to head over to our pointer screen here, our main screen here, so that I can show you guys a few articles here. Let me get this up on screen here for you guys. There we go. So this article here, again, ties in. And so this week's Intel report has kind of been a weird blur between Russian news and China news. It seems like those two, themes have come together. We've gone from covering China and Taiwan separately and Russia separately to now we're covering both of them because of their relations with each other here. This article coming from The Hill, titled "Pentagon Warns China of Consequences If Lethal Aid Goes to Russia." It says here the U.S. has now given several cautionary warnings to China as concerns mount that Beijing will step up support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh told reporters on Wednesday there will certainly be consequences for China should they deepen their relationship with Russia. Quote, "We haven't seen them give lethal aid to Russia at this time for the war, but they also haven't taken that off the table." Assange declined to comment on what those consequences would look like. However, this comes on the heels of similar warnings from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield. Over the weekend, Blinken said China has supplied non-lethal aid to Russia and is considering sending lethal aid. Blinken said he warned his Chinese counterpart at the Munich Security Conference in Germany against the move. Another article here coming from CNBC says Ukraine War Live updates here. Biden calls nuclear treaty suspension, quote, a big mistake. And again, talking about Putin courting Beijing ahead of that trip by the Chinese president to visit Putin in Ukraine. Read you a little bit from this article. It says the war in Ukraine is dominating global geopolitics this week as the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion fast approaches. Officials in Moscow appeared unrepentant about Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement on Tuesday that Russia was suspending its participation in the New START nuclear arms control treaty with the U.S., a pact that limits the two sides' strategic nuclear arsenals. U.S. President Joe Biden, wrapping up a tour in Europe to reaffirm support for Ukraine, called the decision, quote, a big mistake. Putin looked to deepen its ties with China on Wednesday as he welcomed one of Beijing's top diplomats to Moscow. Russia's courting of China comes ahead of an expected visit by President Xi Jinping to Russia this spring. And an article here by Newsweek. It says here, New START may have stopped, but mutual assured destruction remains in effect. I have a video here from Newsweek that we will go ahead and play for you now without the music. So again, they're talking about three key moments here from Putin's speech that he gave. Russia is going to, again, pull out of the treaty, as they mentioned here, stop observing that nuclear treaty. Again, the New START treaty, as it's referred to. So they're pulling out effectively of the treaty. He wants to reevaluate the nuclear arsenal of NATO allies and said Russia will be ready to test nuclear weapons if the U.S. does first. Let's skip back over to here. Putin blames Ukraine and its allies for the war. Putin said Kyiv and Western backers are to blame for the fighting there. Of course, it's been kind of a common theme here since the start of the war. That's kind of their version of what's going on. Saying Russia is, quote, using force to stop it. Again, kind of feeding back into that same propaganda narrative that they've had since the beginning of the war, and that the West is, quote, turning the local conflict into a global confrontation. So, again, kind of alarming statements there, kind of hinting that this might spill over at some point into a future battle between other NATO countries, NATO countries, other than Ukraine. Russia. It also says that Russian state websites went offline in a possible hack that occurred. Some sites streaming the speech appeared to go down during the event. We've seen that actually happen a couple times when Putin gives speeches. State-run RIA Novosti News said a cyber attack was the cause for those streams going offline. We had seen that quite a few times before as Putin gives speeches, as he makes these public addresses, that he does, that these attacks occur, cyber attacks occur on their TV networks, on their streaming sites, etc., during those speeches. In an article here coming from CBS News, Russian test launch of the Satan II missile failed, U.S. says, as Putin suspends role in that nuclear treaty. I'll read you some of the article here. It says Russia's parliament rushed Wednesday to approve a move announced the previous day by President Vladimir Putin, all but finalizing the end of Russia's participation in the New START arms control treaty, the last pact between the world's biggest nuclear powers regulating their atomic arsenals. Russia's, quote, suspension of its participation in the treaty came as it emerged that Moscow had tried but apparently failed to conduct a new test launch of its most powerful intercontinental ballistic missile. A U.S. official told CBS News that Russia carried out a test of an intercontinental ballistic missile on February 18th, which failed. That launch came just 2 days after Mr. Biden, President of the United States, arrived for an unannounced visit in Kyiv, Ukraine. Moscow notified Washington of the launch in advance, as required under the New START treaty. American officials said, adding that the U.S. did not view the test as, quote, a surprise or as a threat to the United States. The failed missile launch is believed to have been of the massive RS-28 Sarmat missile, also known as the Satan II in the West. The Sarmat, one of Russia's next-generation nuclear-capable missile, tips the scales over at 200 tons and carries multiple warheads with a total estimated payload of 10 tons. Putin has referred to it as part of Russia's new, quote, invincible weapons arsenal due to a short initial boost phase that would make it difficult for enemy surveillance systems to track. The Russian leader boasted of a successful Sarmat 2 test launch in April 2022, several weeks after the invasion of Ukraine began, but made no mention of the latest failed test during his Tuesday speech. A article here talking a little bit about, actually, you know what, we'll get to this one later in the show. Let's focus on the Ukraine news here first. And some other news involving China. China's claim to neutrality fades with that Moscow visit. Vladimir Putin, he definitely does it says here in the opening description of the article, the opening paragraph of this article here, Vladimir Putin loves a really long table. Images of his meetings are famous, with Russian leader at one end of the and the person he's speaking to so far away that you wonder if it's hard to hear them. To hear one another. It was not like that when he met China's top foreign policy official Wang Yi. As you can see, it's quite a shorter table that they chose to meet at there. There they were, sitting within handshake distance, within an oval-shaped table in the middle. It could be that the proximity was achieved by seating placement at a previously used table, with the Chinese delegation directly across the middle rather than at the long ends, but the effect was the same. When the footage was released, it appeared to be deliberately symbolic move to show that he had felt safe enough to be that close to the representative of such an important friend. Of course, it has not always been that way. Decades ago, Beijing's network of underground fallout shelters was designed to protect the citizens of the Chinese capital from a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So again, Russia and China are increasingly growing friendly ties. In a video here from ABC News, it talks about Russia amping up its offensive to mark that 1 year since the Ukraine war has begun. Let's go ahead and take a look here at this video.
U.S. allies in Poland, his message to leaders of NATO's eastern flank as Vladimir Putin rallies war supporters in Moscow and reaffirms the Kremlin's ties with Beijing. And 2 powerful winter storms on the move, putting 150 million Americans on alert.
Those are the storms that are causing significant connection issues this evening with our stream, which I'm taking this quick chance while we watch this video to check on.
We're live in Minnesota, where the governor has already declared a state of emergency. And breaking barriers at high speed, we are celebrating Black History Month with NASCAR's Jesse Iwuji, as he and Football Hall of Famer Emmitt Smith high groove.
All right, so we're not going to watch the entire report there. I actually thought that this was that must have been a different video that we had queued up for this, but that there was just a quick report that they were talking about the offensive, and it showed some footage on the ground there, but we'll have to come back to that one. So a post from the Wall Street Journal earlier today talks about how the U.S. And I believe I have. Here it is. Here we go. Here's the full article here. Get that out of the way. It talks about the U.S. is considering releasing of intelligence on China's potential arms transfer to Russia. It says here the Biden administration is considering releasing intelligence it believes shows that China is weighing whether to supply weapons to support Russia's war in Ukraine, U.S. officials said. The discussions on public disclosure come ahead of Friday's United Nations Security Council meeting marking 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. Follows a number of closed-door appeals to China, coordinating among the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, aka NATO, allies, that culminated in a formal warning delivered over the weekend in Munich to Wang Yi, the same diplomat which met with Putin today. In some news about the, I guess I'll go through our main headlines and then we'll get into the Ukraine community aggregated news for this evening. First, I guess I'll go ahead and just finish up these main headlines here. In some news about the Chinese spy balloon, the U.S. Air Force released new images of that suspected Chinese spy balloon. Taken from a U-2 spy plane, which I didn't even know that they were really using these a lot anymore. I mean, I knew that they were still in use, but not this heavily to where they were going to be flying them around the spy balloon. So this, I mean, right away, knowing that they had a U-2 spy plane up there, that they were buzzing this thing with a U-2 kind of paints a different picture here about just how closely they were watching this balloon. When it was over the U.S. You can see the picture on screen now. This is basically a selfie taken by a U-2 spy plane pilot that shows inside the cockpit here, and then of course we could see the Chinese spy balloon in the background here. This is honestly a pretty crazy photo in my opinion. Excellent wallpaper material, by the way. But just a very stunning photo here that the U.S. military released here again, showing kind of a top-down shot. I think what's symbolic about this shot is that we're looking down on the spy balloon here in this shot, and of course, it's being flown. It's being buzzed by this U-2 spy plane, which within itself is kind of significant. You can see the pilot here, wearing that the pressure suit that you have to wear to fly at those high altitudes. But just a pretty interesting view there of that balloon. I'll read you some of the article here. It says the United States Department of Defense has released a new photo depicting a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon as it traveled across North America earlier this month, igniting a political firestorm. We were calling it balloon mania at the time, is what we referred to it as. The photo was taken on the 3rd of February from the cockpit of a U-2 single-engine spy plane deployed by the U.S. Air Force. It shows a close-up of the balloon, which appears to be carrying large panels beneath its white inflatable bulb. According to the Department of Defense, the image was taken as the balloon hovered over the central continental United States a day before it was shot down off the South Carolina coast. The aerial object and its destruction heightened ongoing tensions between the U.S. and China, which insisted the aircraft was nothing more than a civilian weather balloon blown off course. Again, we know that to not be true. It has been confirmed that it was, in fact, a surveillance balloon. Again, here's another article talking about that same thing here. In fact, I think the image is actually slightly different. Oh no, that's the same one. There was another image. Oh, here we go. That might be here. That shows the payload beneath the spy balloon in greater detail. You can kind of see. I mean, again, you have to imagine this is 90 feet long. That this payload here that was hanging off this balloon. So you can kind of see why they didn't want to shoot it down over. Over civilians here in the U.S. because that would create quite a large debris area, and that is a pretty big payload there hanging beneath the balloon. We actually have, here we go, here it is here. So another article talking about Taiwan. They're frustrated by weapons delays, says a key lawmaker who finds this information in a stealth visit, it says here. I'm just reading you the title line here. The war in Ukraine has impressed on Taiwan's leaders the need to acquire and stockpile more weapons. I've talked about this a lot when I discuss China and Taiwan, and the fact that Taiwan really isn't as prepared as a lot of people seem to think. They realize now that they need to be stockpiling weapons. They need to be stockpiling ammunition because it can be used up very quickly, as we've seen in Ukraine. Again, a lesson that's become increasingly urgent in recent months as China's provocations accelerate. Again, this comes from the chairman of the New House Select Committee on China following a stealth trip to Taipei. Quote, almost every Taiwanese official I met with mentioned the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a wake-up call, said Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin in an interview Monday upon his return from the self-governing democracy. China claims Taipei as its own and has vowed it will be united with the People's Republic one day by force if necessary. Taiwan faces a $19 billion arms backlog, awaiting crucial weapons such as Harpoon anti-ship missiles, F-16 fighter jets that in many cases aren't due to arrive for years. In the case of Harpoons, one congressional aide said the missiles aren't likely to begin arriving in real numbers until 2027 at the earliest. So again, I've talked about how China, if they are going to invade Taiwan, they'll probably do it sooner rather than later, and this is why right here, this very information which I am discussing here. It's because those weapon systems, that ammo isn't going to start arriving for some time. Okay, so I noticed here that my clock needs to be slightly adjusted. That's bothering me. Is that better? That looks better. Okay, that'll do. In an article here from AP News, China blasts the Pentagon's officials' Taiwan visit. China on Wednesday sharply criticized a visit to Taiwan by a senior Pentagon official and reaffirmed it has sanctioned Lockheed Martin and a unit of Raytheon for supplying military equipment to the self-governing island democracy. The comments from the cabinet's Taiwan Affairs Office underscore the dramatic deterioration in relations between Beijing and Washington over Taiwan, technology spying allegations, and increasingly Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Asked about the reported visit by Michael Chase, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for China, office spokesperson Zhu Fenglian said China resolutely opposes any official interaction and military collaboration between the U.S. and Taiwan. Efforts by Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party to cement the island's independence with foreign assistance are, quote, doomed to failure, Zhu told reporters. China considers Taiwan part of its territory to be brought under its control by force if necessary, blah, 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 blah. We've talked about that many, many times. We've mentioned that, how China views Taiwan. So I have a short video here coming from ABC News. Again, it talks a little bit more about Biden and his statement saying that it's a big mistake for Russia to be pulling out of the New START nuclear treaty. Let's take a listen.
We are going to begin tonight with my exclusive interview with President Biden, late today right here in Warsaw. The president tonight on Vladimir Putin, who has just declared Russia will suspend its commitment to the key nuclear treaty with the United States. President Biden telling me that's a big mistake. It comes after the speech on the world stage, President Biden defending democracy, rallying NATO, standing by Ukraine, now 1 year into this war. But today in Russia, Vladimir Putin welcoming China's chief diplomat, Putin holding a wartime rally and announcing China's President Xi will be visiting Russia this spring. Tonight, President Biden's message for Vladimir Putin. I know this is a defining moment in this war. We watched your speech here in Warsaw. And as you know, just hours before, Vladimir Putin gave his own speech. And I wanted to ask you about something Vladimir Putin said. He said that Russia is suspending participation, cooperation in the nuclear treaty with the United States. What's your message to Putin on that?
It's a big mistake to do that, not very responsible. And but I don't read into that he's thinking of using nuclear weapons or anything like that. I think it's I'm not sure what else he was able to say in his speech at the moment, but I think it's a mistake, and I'm confident we'll be able to work it out.
He is saying he's going to suspend participation in this nuclear treaty. Rhetoric is one thing, but we're a year into this war now. Does it concern you when he says something like this, and are we less safe?
Well, look, I think we're less safe when we walk away from arms control agreements that are very much in both parties' interest and the world's interest. But I've not seen anything, we've not seen anything where there's a change in his posture, what they're doing, the idea that somehow this means they're thinking of using nuclear weapons, international continental ballistic missiles. There's no evidence of that.
And we should note tonight that this is just part of our extended interview with President Biden that continues Friday in Washington. We will press the president on China and the relationship with Russia and much more. That's Friday night right here on World News Tonight.
So there you have it, the words from President Biden there. Again, calling Russia's decision to pull out of that nuclear treaty a big mistake. An article here I have from The Hill. It talks about what Putin's speech reveals about his plans in Ukraine. I'll go ahead and read you guys some of this article here. It says, Russian President Vladimir Putin began his address before Russia's parliament on Tuesday by underlining the stakes of his war in Ukraine. Quote, this is a time of radical, irreversible change in the entire world, of crucial historical events that will determine the future of our country and our people, a time when every one of us bears a colossal responsibility, he told gathered lawmakers. Again, those are words coming from Vladimir Putin. He said many of the headlines coming out of his speech, the article says here, I should correct myself. The article says here, many of the headlines coming out of his speech focused on his announcement that Russia would unilaterally suspend its involvement in the last remaining nuclear treaty with the United States, a move that further stoked nuclear anxiety in the West. But the speech also offered indications of how the Russian leader might handle the second year of the war he started on the 24th February of 2022, and how he is seeking to shape the narrative to his domestic audience and the world. Quote, this is the closest to a true wartime speech that we have heard so far, said Daniel Gur, a defense expert and senior vice president at the Lexington Institute, a public policy think tank. And Putin is no longer framing his fight as a special operation to liberate Ukraine. He is now casting it as an existential war against Western civilization. Quote, this came closest to sort of saying it's them versus us, added Gore. The Western elite, this came from Putin, a quote from Putin here, saying, the Western elite make no secret of their goal, which is, I quote, Russia's strategic defeat, Putin said Tuesday. Quote here saying, what does this mean to us? This means they plan to finish us once and for all, he said. Quote, in other words, they plan to grow a local conflict into a global confrontation. This is how we understand it, and we will respond accordingly, because this represents an existential threat to our country. This sweeping framing of the war, blaming Imperial America and its allies for starting the war, despite supposed Russian efforts at peace, gives Putin much-needed political cover as he gears up for a long fight, experts said. The Russian leader set early expectations that his special operations would take only a matter of days. He now needs to justify an all-out war that has cost thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives, that's how they should have worded that, isolated Russia internationally, and promises months or years of additional pain. The case for sending Russian soldiers to die is much stronger if Putin says, look, this is defending not just Russians in Ukraine or even the Russian border, this is defending the culture, this is defending the Russians against the pollution from the West, said Gore. Putin also needs to explain why Russia's war effort is flailing after a year in which Moscow's troops made early gains but have been on a months-long losing streak. That was noted by Andres Kaeskamp, a political science professor at the University of Toronto who studies the war. In some Ohio train derailment news, EPA says it can fine Norfolk Southern $70,000 a day if it falls short of cleaning up and paying for the Ohio toxic train wreck. The head of the Environmental Protection Agency threatened expensive consequences if Norfolk Southern fails to fully clean up its toxic train wreck and pay for the fallout in East Palestine, Ohio. The EPA's new legally binding order, set to take effect Thursday, will ensure that Norfolk Southern pays for the mess that they've created. For weeks, residents have reported a variety of health problems since the Norfolk Southern train carrying toxic chemicals derailed, spewing black clouds of smoke over the community of about 5,000 people. To help prevent a deadly explosion of vinyl chloride, crews released a toxic chemical into a trench and burned it off. And another article here coming from NPR talks about governor's office in Pennsylvania makes a criminal referral in Ohio train derailment. I'll read you some of the article here. It says Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said the state's acting attorney general is investigating whether criminal charges were warranted in the derailment of a Norfolk Southern Railroad train just over the state line in East Palestine, Ohio. Shapiro blasted Norfolk Southern's arrogance and incompetence in an interview with Morning Edition's Leila Fidel on Wednesday, saying the railroad didn't participate in unified efforts with emergency services from Pennsylvania and Ohio after the derailment took place. Quote, we made a criminal referral to the Office of Attorney General. They'll determine whether or not there was criminal activity, Shapiro said. Quote, what I know is that Norfolk Southern is governed every day not by caring about the communities that they send their trains through, but by corporate greed. We'll now switch over to our community aggregated news here from our Situation Room in the Discord server. I'm going to go through kind of the significant posts from the past few days here. We'll start with our last Ministry of Defense intelligence update from the UK. It's for the 22nd of February here. This is, again, the latest defense intelligence update on the situation in Ukraine for the 22nd of February, 2023. Again, this comes from the Ministry of Defense of the UK. Let's get this up on screen, blown up for you. On the 21st of February, 2023, President Putin made his first State of the Nation speech since 2021. It's basically the equivalent of, here in the United States, we have the State of the Union addresses. It's kind of similar a speech given by President Putin here. He made it clear that he intends to continue with the, quote, special military operation in Ukraine. He characterized Western elites as having, quote, become a symbol of total unprincipled lies and suspended Russia from the New START nuclear treaty, as we discussed earlier in the report. Putin continued the bellicose tone he has adopted in speeches over the last 6 months, but did not reveal any practical measures which might relieve Russia's current deadlock on the battlefield in Ukraine. Putin continues to present a contradictory narrative of existential struggle while insisting everything in Russia is fine and going to plan. This renders both messages ineffective. That post coming from Kayuka on the Discord server in the Situation Room. Thank you so much, Kayuka, for sending that over our way. And a post here posted by Mod 10,098 from OSINT Defender on Twitter here. It says Russian sources are now claiming that a large number of Ukrainian combat forces are being moved towards the border with Moldova and Transnistria, and that they, alongside Moldovan security forces, are planning to invade the breakaway region sometime between February 24th and the 28th. Again, this news is coming from Russian forces, so keep that in mind. All right, I'll read this again. Russian sources are now claiming that a large number of Ukrainian combat forces are being moved towards the border with Moldova and Transnistria, which is the breakaway region there in Moldova, which has Russian forces on that territory, or I should say pro-Russian forces. and that they, alongside Moldovan security forces, are planning to invade the breakaway region sometime between February 24th and 28th. You can see kind of a map here that they have on screen, again, which shows Transnistria here, and that apparently Ukraine is moving forces along the border with Transnistria, and that in tandem with Moldovan security forces will take that region back from Russian-held forces. I should say pro-Russian Moldovan forces, we should say. Transnistrian forces. Again, that post coming from Mod 10,098. Thank you so much, Mod, for that post. Our next post is the Russian offensive campaign assessment for the 21st of February, coming from the ISW, also known as the Institute for the Study of War. Kayuka has summarized our key takeaways here, which I will read for you now. Again, big shout out to him for summarizing here. It says Russian President Vladimir Putin's 21st February address to the Russian Federal Assembly did not articulate specific goals or intentions for the war in Ukraine, instead reinforcing several long-standing rhetorical lines in an effort to buy Putin more space and time for a protracted war. Putin's announcement of Russia's suspension of the participation in the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, also known as START, that nuclear treaty which I mentioned earlier, captured more attention than the relatively boilerplate content of the rest of the speech. U.S. President Joe Biden gave a speech in Warsaw, Poland on February 21st to reaffirm U.S. and NATO support for Ukraine after his trip to Kyiv. Many Russian military bloggers condemned Putin's failure to use his speech to forward new war aims, outline new measures to support the war, or hold Russian authorities accountable for their many military failures. International journalists reportedly obtained the Kremlin's classified 2021 strategy document on restoring Russian suzerainty over Belarus through the Union state by 2030. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev and Chinese Communist Party Central Foreign Affairs Commission Office Director Wang Yi, that's a big title there, met in Moscow on the 21st of February on deepening Sino-Russian cooperation. The Financial Times reported that Wagner financier Yevgeny Prigozhin's international companies continue to garner hundreds of millions of dollars in profits despite long-standing Western sanctions. Some other key takeaways. Russian forces continued to conduct limited ground attacks northwest of Svatovi near Kremenina. Ukrainian forces reportedly conducted a limited counterattack near Kremenina. So if we switch back over to our battle map here, get that up on screen so you can see here. Where's that for me? Here, we got that over here. So again, I'll kind of zoom into our eastern our eastern frontier, our contact line, or the zero line, as I've heard many Ukrainians refer to it as. Russian forces continued making incremental tactical gains in and around Bakhmut. So here's the city of Bakhmut, again, which they are attempting to encircle. They also continued ground attacks near Advika as well. Ukrainian officials reported that Russian forces continued to reinforce and build fortifications in rear areas in southern Ukraine. So again, I mentioned before that the southern contact line is for the most part stagnant. As for Russian territorial gains, there is a few areas. You can see here they have an arrow, again, showing the direction of attack by those Russian forces in the south of the country. The Kremlin may be directing patronage programs between Russian regions and occupied Ukrainian territory to promote socio-economic recovery and infrastructure development. Russian President Vladimir Putin further expanded unrealistic promises of benefits for Russian soldiers in his address to the Russian Federal Assembly. In a article here coming from Ukrainska Pravda, this is also posted by Kayuka, it talks about 11 explosions rock Mariupol. This is from today, Wednesday, the 22nd. But it says here the explosions occurred last night on the 21st of February. Source, Mariupol City Council on Telegram. The quote from the Mariupol City Council saying, Mariupol explosions were heard. So far, 11 explosions have been reported in the Russian-occupied city of Mariupol. According to preliminary information, 2 strikes occurred, one near an AS-2 in the central district, the other near a Stan 3000 in the Kalaminis district. They likely took place in areas where enemy forces were concentrated. Details. The city council reported that the first explosions rocked Mariupol at 22:33 hours. According to their information, power and mobile services were disrupted in the central and left bank districts following those explosions. A Mariupol resident confirmed the information about the explosions in a comment for Ukrainska Pravda. He said 10 or 11 explosions could be heard in the northeastern part of the city. We also had a report of a Russian ammo depot that was destroyed in Mariupol during that night. So it was most likely one of the explosions heard was that ammo depot exploding in Mariupol. From the Kyiv Independent here, they say Russian ammunition warehouse was destroyed in occupied Mariupol during those attacks that evening. Another post coming from Kayuka, this came from CNN, again, talks about the failure of that missile test by Russia. It says here, Russia carried out a test of an intercontinental ballistic missile that appears to have failed around the time President Joe Biden was in Ukraine. According to 2 U.S. officials familiar with the matter, Russia notified the United States in advance of the launch through deconfliction lines under its New START treaty obligations, one official said, adding that such testing is routine. Now, keep in mind here, those deconfliction lines, the notifications that they are doing these tests through those deconfliction lines, I believe, are null and void now that they have pulled out of that nuclear START treaty. So that's a question that is still posed here, if they will continue to communicate when they do these tests. Again, that remains to be seen. The test of heavy Sarmat missile, nicknamed the Satan II in the West and capable of delivering multiple nuclear warheads, appears to have failed, officials said. It has been successfully tested before, and had this one worked, U.S. officials believe Russian President Vladimir Putin would have highlighted the test in his State of the Nation address on Tuesday. Again, for those that don't know, that test did fail. Another post coming from Ukrainska Pravda says an air raid warning announced on radio in 10 Russian cities. Russian Ministry for Emergency said it's a hacker attack. So again, another report of cyber attacks here in Russia. We had the during his speech, during Putin's speech, there were many cyber attacks on both the sites streaming the broadcast as well as certain TV stations that were broadcasting the speech as well. It says here on the morning of February 22nd, radio announcements of an air raid warning and a missile strike threat were made in 10 Russian cities, and later the Russian Emergencies Ministry said it was a hacker attack. Source, Russian online media outlet Baza Ostrozono Novosti, Russian independent news website Meduza, and also Russian state-owned media news outlet RIA Novosti. The details here, a quote saying, "Attention, an air raid warning is being announced. Go to the shelter immediately. Attention, attention, threat of a missile strike," was broadcast on the radio stations Relax FM, of Avato Radio, Humor FM, and Comedy Radio as well. We actually have a video here. So they actually had the sign of an air raid siren going during the broadcast, which, I mean, I guess for any Russian citizen would probably be the hint of this was not legit. But you can imagine many Russian citizens probably thought that this was serious when they heard it. Our next post here, coming from Dwarden, on the Situation Room, says specialized UAV company, Russian vehicles are about to be hunted here. Let's take a look at this post coming from an unverified Twitter source. It talks about Sweet Commander-in-Chief signed a decree according to which, quote, the Birds of Magyar detachment was reorganized into a special company with the sole activity of using UAVs for search and destroy missions. The company is now actively looking for new drone pilots. Let's take a look at this video here that they have along with the post, showing some Ukrainian soldiers using these drones. I watched a separate video of an interview with this gentleman here, looking at some of the tech that they had been using and some of the drone systems that they had been using. Another article here coming from Mod 10,098. Oh, yeah. Kayuka reminded me. Our screen was still on the battle map. Let's head back over to our... our main screen here. So, again, we'll just go back and watch the video. So here's that video of the radio giving the warning here, the air raid, the fake air raid warning in Russian territory.
Угроза ракетного удара.
Very interesting. And then, of course, I was talking about this gentleman here that, again, the UAV pilots of the Ukrainian military, some of the technology that they're using, some of the drones they're using to fight those Russian occupying forces. This is an article, again, which I read to you earlier, talking about U.S. considering releasing the intelligence on China's potential arms transfer to Russia. But thank you, Mod, for sending that over. So this is a video coming from a Twitter source, Defense of Ukraine. They are verified on Twitter. Basically, this talks about the area around Volodar. This shows the area around Volodar and some of the destruction there. Let's take a look. So you can see the ground here littered with craters from artillery strikes, mortar rounds, tank rounds, no doubt, as well. Also, you can kind of get a scope for some of the distance that they're operating with here. I believe you then see a tank round being fired here. Oh, actually, no. So that could have been I think that was incoming artillery. At first, I thought I saw a round being fired from a tank here, but that vehicle looks to be on fire there. So you can see what seems to be a tank here. Actually, that's not where the strike landed even. So it landed here, not too far from what might be a tank or a vehicle up this way, maybe a APC of some kind. So you can see just kind of the scope here of the destruction in eastern Ukraine. This is another great example. I've showed quite a bit of footage on the show in recent weeks here of some of the destruction in and around Bakhmut and in other places in the east of the country. So I have another article here coming from, again, this is posted by Kayuka, but it's from Chris O. Wiki. Again, unverified on Twitter, but I thought I should show it. Talks about Russia's ammunition shortage in eastern Ukraine is reportedly so severe that its troops there have reportedly been issued with completely unusable munitions, including shells which are so rusty they have simply disintegrated. So you can see some of the photos here of some of these munitions. Absolutely unusable. for the most part. This is a video, again, posted by Kayuka. This comes from Babak Taghavi. I'm not sure if I'm... Basically, the Crisis Watch. That's their part of their handle here. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but this shows, watch how low the Su-25 ground attack fighter jets of Ukrainian Air Force are flying to avoid being detected by Russian radars. At this very low altitude, the main threat is the high voltage wires, so the pilots must know the highways, which they fly above very well. Let's take a look at this footage without the music. Again, you can see on screen here footage of those Ukrainian fighter jets and how low they are flying above these highways. Basically, I mean, they're using the highways to navigate at this point. You're flying so low, you have that very easy visual representation of your path. You just fly right down the highway to your destination wherever you're going. And so you can have a really good understanding of, like what obstacles you may have to avoid. It's an open highway. So again, really the only thing you're having to avoid is those voltage lines, telephone poles, things like that, especially if you're flying super low. But again, just kind of some insane footage here of those Ukrainian fighter pilots and how low they are flying to avoid those Russian radar. In a post here coming from mil.in.ua, the defense industry of, which I'm not exactly sure what mil.in.ua is. I know that's a .Ukraine, military industrial defense industry of Ukraine. I don't know if this is an official website here. I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure this is a private website, but I could be wrong. Let's go down and check the source. Ukrainian military portal publications may be cited only under condition of source indication. Ukrainian Military Center Public Organization. So, there you have it. So again, this article coming from mil.in.ua. Again, this talks about members of the Israeli Knesset were demonstrated Iranian drones used by Russia. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine demonstrated Iranian Shahed 136 and Mohajer 6 drones to the parliamentary delegation from Israel. A quote here saying, at the invitation of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine today, together with the members of the Knesset, we looked at the Iranian drones used by Russia in the war against Ukraine. Iran is a threat to Israel, to Ukraine, and to the whole world. You can see some pictures here of them looking at some of these drones, and actually kind of puts it into perspective how big some of these bomb drones are that they are using in Ukraine. You could even see on the floor here, I believe these are some of the engines that they're using for these aircraft, but they are not small at all. These are quite large here. This is a Iranian Shahed 129 that you see here on screen. Very reminiscent of a to me at least, this looks like a U.S. Predator drone. Very similar in design, at least, or at least the shape of it looks very similar. Right here's an Iranian Shahed 191 UAV. Part of an Iranian Shahed 136 drone. This was captured February 2023. Or at least the picture, was taken February 2023. You can see here, part of the Iranian Shahed 136 drone. And with a person standing next to it, you can get kind of a really good idea of how big these drones actually are. In the last post this evening, Pineapple posting to the Situation Room. It says it's age restricted here, but I'll read you the description here of this post. It says it appears that Russia is beginning to paint the picture for the invasion on Moldova. This is directly from the Russian MOD, linked below. I'll see if I can actually get this article open up here really quick. Bear with me here while I get this logged in. Okay, so I don't know why they age restricted this image. We'll go ahead and we'll bring it up on screen. It says here, according to available information, in the near future, the Kyiv regime is preparing. So again, this is from Russian sources. So keep in mind, these words are coming from the Russians themselves. It says here, according to available information, in the near future, the Kyiv regime is preparing an armed provocation against the Pridnestrovian Moldovan Republic, which will be carried out by units of the armed forces of Ukraine, including the involvement of the nationalist formation Azov, which again they like to use as a big propaganda tool. As a pretext for the invasion, it is planned to stage an alleged offensive of Russian troops from the territory of Transnistria. To do this, the Ukrainian saboteurs participating in the staged invasion will be dressed in the uniform of the military personnel of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The Russian Ministry of Defense is closely monitoring the situation on the border of Ukraine with the Pridnestrovian Moldovan Republic and is ready to respond to any changes in the situation. So again, that sums up all of the Situation Room community aggregated reports that I have this evening for you guys. We'll now start our Q&A, and as we do that Q&A, I will go through some of the open source intelligence tools that we have, and I'll read off some of that content. But go ahead and post your questions. Post your questions in the live chat over on the YouTube channel, and your comments as well, and I'll start reading those off here shortly. So first, this evening, we'll go to our live universal awareness map, and I'll read you some of the recent developments here that we have on the live universal awareness map. Here we go. I'll start here at the 19 hours mark here. Explosions were reported in Mariupol. Air sirens is sounding. I talked about that earlier. Missile launches from this is 19 hours ago. Missile launches from the Razminoy, Belgrade region. You can see a picture of the contrails from those missiles. 19 hours ago, several missile strikes reported in Kharkiv. 19 hours ago, explosions were reported in Shebekino. 18 hours ago, explosions were reported in Sloviansk. That's where that's located there in the east of the country. 18 hours ago, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. You can see a picture of them shaking hands here on screen. And then 14 hours ago, Poland hosts the Bucharest B9 summit of 9 NATO Eastern Flank countries. President Biden is also present as a sign of American commitment to U.S. military presence in this region. I have a video as well here showing President Biden walking into the meeting. You have some audio as well.
I feel like I'm coming home.
He said, and I quote, "I feel like I'm coming home."
I feel like I'm coming home.
Very interesting. 13 hours ago, President Joe Biden reaffirms U.S. commitment to NATO while meeting with the leaders of the Bucharest 9. We will defend literally every inch of NATO. Let's go ahead and have a video we can show you.
I've said it to you many times. I'll say it again. It's absolutely clear
Article 5 is a sacred commitment the United States has made. We will defend literally every inch of NATO, every inch of NATO. And this is an important moment. I look forward to the discussion and the next steps we can take together and to keep our alliance strong and to further deter aggression. Because what literally is at stake is not just Ukraine, it's freedom. The idea that over 100,000 forces would invade another country after war, since World War II, nothing like that has happened. Things have changed radically. We have to make sure we change them back. So thank you all very much for allowing me to be with you, and I look forward to our private discussions.
So there you have it. So that about sums up our live UA updates, our universal awareness updates. We'll head over to our Eyes on Russia map, also known as our heat map here. That's what I've been referring to it as. And we'll take a look at the entire month of February so far in events in Ukraine. So again, this goes from February 1st to the 13th of February. So all of this activity here that you've seen has happened in the last 13 days. So again, the hot zones in the east of the country, Donetsk, Luhansk, Bakhmut, of course, down by Volodar, there's quite a few hot zones as well. Kharkiv, constantly bombarded. It is also a hot zone in Kharkiv in the north of the country. Kyiv, again, isn't out of the picture as well. Many strikes occurring there. Kherson, pretty active here, and Novokhovka, pretty active as well in recent days and weeks. So again, this is all the activity that has happened in the past 13 days plotted out on a heat map here. Of course, there are many strikes which are not plotted here, air bombardments, etc., that aren't plotted here on the map. But this gives a good picture of where the heaviest fighting is occurring in Ukraine along that eastern front. You can see some strikes even in Russian territory. That's bombardment that has occurred there on Russian territory. In some naval news, basically business as usual in the Black Sea. We haven't seen too many changes there. Go here to my other naval map here. I believe we did have a post from the 21st from Rakkasan. This comes from Mordor's Madness on Telegram here. Says emergency situation in the Black Sea nearby Novorossiysk. Dry cargo broke in half. Nothing is known about the fate of the crew members. It is reported that there were 11 citizens of Orikaland on board. The rescue operation is ongoing. Let's take a look here on screen at that sinking ship here. So just a quick video there of that ship sinking. Again, no further information on the status of that crew. In some aircraft news, we can go over to our aircraft map. Let me go back to ADSB. So aircraft activity over the U.S. has been pretty active over the past week or two, as I've talked about before. We've seen an uptick in the amount of military aircraft and just sightings of interesting aircraft, notable aircraft, I should say. Nothing that I would say would be a cause for alarm, but is definitely an indicator of increased readiness level and activity by our military here in the United States. Over Europe tonight, you got RCH 4169, a C-17 hanging out. Are they en route somewhere? So it looks like they've had a change in trajectory here. Nothing on the western edge of Ukraine here this evening that we can at least see here on our civilian visible radar here. Of course, if we flip the... so this is all aircraft you're seeing on screen now. Of course, Ukraine is still a no-fly zone, as I've talked about in recent streams. It has been since the start of the war. So again, no commercial aircraft flying in or out of Ukraine. But military aircraft-wise, we're not seeing too much on screen this evening. I believe we don't even have Forte in the air this evening as well. but a couple notable aircraft in the European airspace tonight. We'll open up flight radar here. We'll take a look at our most tracked flights for this evening. So not too much activity this evening. We have Kanto 20 out of Tokyo. Again, that's U.S. military. U.S. military aircraft up this evening. We also have no call sign over Tokyo. Probably another. Yep, that's U.S. Air Force as well. Was that a call sign? Yeah, RCH 785 over Tokyo. BLCAT 62, U.S. Navy, hanging out also above Tokyo. So some interesting military aircraft above Japan this evening. Quite a few of them, actually. There's quite a few aircraft that are up above Japan at this time that are noteworthy, that are being tracked here on Flight Radar 24. But overall, it's pretty much business as usual this evening when it comes to aircraft in our skies, with the exception of the U.S. We have, quite a few aircraft on screen this evening. It's been a little bit busier as of late, I've noticed. Switching over to our Detrude says Japan is doing drills. Yeah, I also heard a few rumors that they are currently conducting drills over there. That could be why we're seeing those aircraft on screen this evening. Our alert map here, not too much going on at this very moment in time for air raid alert. It's been a little bit quiet over the past few hours here today as for air raid alerts in Ukraine, so not much to show there. Head back over to our situation room and I'll start reading off some comments here. Speedy Squirrel, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, says, Nemico, we are having a gigantic military expo in UAE this week. U.S. already tried wooing us and KSA to side with them on the Ukraine items. Any other chatter you are hearing about this? Not too much. I know there's quite a few drills that are occurring across the globe, military drills that many countries are staging. I hadn't heard anything about the military expo, though, but I believe that's a geopolitical trend which is occurring in many other countries, as the U.S. looks to garner support. Not just the U.S., but NATO allies look to garner support for their operations in Ukraine. Kayuka says, thanks for the report. Thank you, Kayuka, for your reports that you've been making over in the Situation Room, as well as on the Account YouTube channel. If you guys haven't seen that, go check those out. Those are great. They're like quick 5 to 10 minute Ukraine war reports that he puts up daily. He also said, almost 5 a.m. here, 3 hours sleep left, so I have to head off now. Well, good night to you, Kayuka, and thank you so much for stopping by this evening. Appy Moo, glad to see you this evening. As always, it's good to have you in the live chat. Ryan, thank you so much for tuning in. It says Ukraine isn't NATO. Yes. For a lot of people that don't know, it seems like people every day, I hear people all the time like, isn't Ukraine part of NATO? Why aren't we defending Ukraine? They are not part of NATO. At least not yet. Maybe someday they will become part of NATO. But yeah, I've heard quite a few people make that mistake before. Saying, why aren't we defending Ukraine? Why haven't we gone in there? Why hasn't the U.S. military gone in there? It's because they were not part. Ukraine is not in the NATO alliance. If they were, it'd be a totally different ballgame. I don't think Russia would have invaded in the first place if Ukraine was part of the NATO alliance. Michelle Welch, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Says, any word on Mehmet? He's doing good from what I've heard. He was, he had, I believe he lost a few family members in the quakes in Turkey, the earthquakes that occurred in Turkey and Syria. So he's been dealing with that. He was looking to raise some money to help some people that he knew down there in Turkey. I believe he still is in Kyiv in Ukraine, in the capital city there. But from what I've heard, other than that, he's doing pretty good. I actually hope to have him on for an interview at some point here in one of our reports. At some point soon, we're going to have him on for a interview. As always, we like to talk to Mehmet. He's our eyes on the ground there in Kyiv in Ukraine. Tasha says, will you have any live cameras up like before? Yeah, this week we didn't have our 24/7 Intel streams up. I just been too busy, and we were having some issues with those. So I'll be getting those 24/7 Intel streams back up probably within the next day or so here. If I have time, I could probably get them back up this evening, actually, if I can get on that. But well, at the very least, we'll have the Ukraine 24/7 Intel stream running. If not, also the China-Taiwan monitoring stream. Takey Jakey says, are there any signs Russia's manufacturing facilities can't keep this up forever? Well, they've already had issues sourcing a lot of parts that they need for some of their equipment. Things like, chips, PCBs, different electrical components that they need for some of their equipment, for some of the weapon systems that they're looking to build. So you could already see signs that they can't keep up already, but I would argue that that will continue to progress. Trevor Harriet says they can probably get a lot of computer chips, such boards, and raw materials internally and from China. Well, they can get some from China, but there's a lot of stuff that they need to get from the West. Surprisingly, they'll have to go through dramatic change if they're going to, get a lot of that stuff domestically. I'm not even sure if that would be possible for them to do that. Maybe possibly with time, I would imagine. Epi Moo with the Phil Collins. Is that a Phil Collins reference? Patty Wack, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Glad to see you. I hope you get some good sleep. Separate says, I think China is helping Russia with chips because they understand that if Russia falls, then China will be next. That could be. That is a wise assessment. As Selena says, and unfortunately, Moldova is not part of NATO. Well, definitely I think Transnistria is the region there that's in focus. It's that breakaway region of Moldova. Dietrich says, send some info in a whisper to you that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that at some point, Dietrich. I don't check my Twitch DMs as much as I should, but I'll definitely go over there and take a look at that information you sent over. Christopher Mayer says, blackouts here in Georgia. I believe Georgia is where you're referring to there. Anyone else experiencing this? Well, we're having all sorts of communication issues and power issues in my neck of the woods here, my area of the country, due to the ongoing blizzards. Dead, thank you so much for tuning in. Michelle Welch, Epi Moo. Special Force Horse is always good to see you. Twiggy, good to see you. Doom Pie, good to see you. Christopher, Rakasan. To everybody that tuned in this evening, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I think that's going to about conclude our Q&A for this evening. Maybe I should start doing the Q&A at the beginning of the show. That might be something I'll have to look into. Trevor says, any news or updates on the alleged forced re-education of Ukrainian children? I've covered that a few times on the show. If you go back to some of our previous reports, I talk a little bit about that. I haven't had any recent developments. I mean, there's a lot of news that's come out over the past month about that. Basically just confirming that it's something that is indeed happening. I don't have any further updates as of this moment, though, on that. Again, if you haven't already, guys, hit that like button. best way to get the algorithm's attention. Hit the subscribe button, the best way to support the channel. It's also the only way to get access to our live chat. Comment, share this this stream. After these streams are done, I do upload them as a video to the YouTube channel. So in case you didn't catch the full report, you'll be able to go over there and catch it as a video. On top of that, we also have a condensed version of these reports, which are uploaded every week. So make sure to tune in for that when that's uploaded to the channel. If you're following along on Twitch, thank you so much for tuning in. To everybody that subscribed this evening, thank you guys so much. To everybody that followed over on Twitch or subscribed over on Twitch, thank you so much for stopping by, following along. We didn't have a live poll this evening, but we will with next week's report. I just wasn't able to get that one pinned down this evening, but we'll do that next week. The Discord server, if you want to get more intertwined with the community, if you want to join the community discussion, if you want to have an excellent resource on up-to-date information with the Ukraine war, related to the Ukraine war and other global security threats, check out the Discord server. There's a link to that in the description below. Everybody is welcome to join. You can get your ranks from the welcome channel over there and then start posting in the different channels. We're live every weekday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Nemico Network, so make sure to tune in for next week's live stream report. We'll be waiting for you here on Nemico Network, and I can't wait for you guys to join us. Once again, it looks like my clock's size got changed midstream. Not sure how that happened. I'm gonna have to lock down the sizing on this somehow. We want that to be perfectly aligned. That looks better. Just me, thank you so much. Uktin, thank you so much for tuning in. Ollie, thank you so much for tuning in. To everybody that stopped by this evening, again, guys, glad to have you. Again, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to get caught up on everything that's going on in the world. For taking some time out of your day to be here with us, to join in on the discussion. It's important for us to have the discussion. It's important for us to connect and to exchange information like we are doing now, to stay informed, to make sure others are staying informed as well. We'll be here again, guys, next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, I'll be uploading a few videos this week. We'll have the video of this report coming out in a few hours from now. Once it's uploaded, we'll also have our condensed report probably sometime tomorrow as well. I have some shorts that lined up for that I'll be uploading to the channel, as well as we'll have our 1-year Ukraine war recap video that I have coming up. I also have a video I've been working on talking about Russian bots. We'll be talking about that soon and some of their misinformation tactics. Not just Russian misinformation tactics, but online bots in general and how they're used for misinformation. So it's a pretty comprehensive video. I've been working on that for a while, so I'll be bringing that to you guys soon. Until next time, I think that about wraps it up, guys. I think we covered everything this evening. A little bit of a shorter report this evening. Even though I had a lot of news to go over, we were able to condense it down into a timely form factor here. Next week's report will probably be a little bit more involved because there's a lot of topics that I want to kind of do a deep dive into a little further. So, again, make sure to tune in next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next live weekly Intel report. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Nemico Network.
Something that will change our daily lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.